All right. Are all my judges ready? All right, your timer. The negative team?
Yes, thank you.
Roman?
Yep.
All right. The negative team has accepted 3 main facts about our case. First, Jackson Vanik harms human rights. Second, our plan improves human rights. And third, our plan puts sanctions on Iran and saves the lives of billions of American soldiers and American citizens. This in itself merits an affirmative ballot. Human rights are very important, yes, but they're useless if you're dead. If Iran fired a nuclear weapon at us, all human rights in the world couldn't matter because human life would be destroyed. I ask you to keep that in mind, that we put sanctions on Iran as I go down the negative arguments. We'll first take a look at the issue of symbolism. They talk about how Jackson Vanik is the only symbolic tool of the United States. I have 2 responses that reiterate my partner's arguments. First, effective tools. Effective tools. Now, the negative team failed to respond to my partner's argument that we have democracy in Russia that actually is effective for symbolism and actually helps make the situation in Russia better. Also in my 1AC, I said that human rights tools in Russia will stay in place as a reminder that improvement in human rights is important to the United States. So yes, the United States is making a statement with graduation that first, we need Russia to improve their human rights. And second, this will do this. Graduation will do this. And that's my second response. Graduation improves human rights. Graduation improves human rights. Human rights are very, very critical. We very agree with this. This is one of the many reasons why graduation is such a beneficial policy, because our plan will in fact improve human rights in Russia. And this is backed up by human rights groups in Russia who know the situation and know what's best for human rights. Moving on, let's go to the issue of whether or not the text of the amendment says a country has to be graduated. My response is former graduations. Former graduations. The fact is that several countries have been graduated. This is simply a system the United States government put in place. It's irrelevant whether or not this is in the actual text of the amendment. Another argument under here was that Russia isn't punished. They talked about how Russia isn't being punished by the Jackson Vanik Amendment. My response is relational tensions. Relational tensions. I agree that trade is not restricted, that Russia is not being punished, but the relational tension of Jackson Vanik has gone uncontested by the negative team. They accept that Jackson Vanik harms our fundamental relationship with Russia. Therefore, the United States-Russian relationship is being punished. The United States is being punished as we keep having this law over Russia. Moving on, their analogy about the curfew, this is very actually amusing. The fact is that Russia's been under Jackson Vanik for 34 years. They're 34 years old. They don't have to have a curfew over them. They're grown up. They know how to deal with the issues of immigration. They also talk about the speeding limit. However, for you, back to my 1AC, I read evidence that graduation will improve human rights. The speeding limit isn't an issue. Why? Because human rights are important, yes, and our plan recognizes this and recognizes that a step forward in human rights will come about as a result of graduation. Let's move on to the issue of the leverage and whether or not Jackson Vanik has leverage. They talked about how we added brackets. The context of the piece of evidence, it says 35 years after Jackson Vanik became law, it doesn't mean we can expect to do this. So this author is talking about how we can't expect to apply Jackson Vanik to today's world, and he went on to say that Jackson Vanik doesn't actually work. So this is actually proper context that we provided. We put in the bracket there for clarity in today's debate around. The fact is that this author believes that Jackson Vanik has no leverage. He's a very credible author for talking about this. So there is no leverage of Jackson Vanik. This is very ethical. I've asked you not to disregard this piece of evidence. And we've also read several other pieces of evidence supporting this argument. Now, they also talked about immigration, about how we need to ensure that Russia will, in fact, continue to allow free immigration. I reiterate my partner's responses. First is free travel agreements. Free travel agreements. Russia has signed free travel agreements, visa waiver programs, with a bunch of countries around the world. There is absolutely no reason why they would restrict immigration under our plan. No reason presented by the negative team. Secondly, our plan improves human rights, and a human right is that of immigration. So there's no reason for Russia to restrict immigration under our plan, and in fact, human rights will be improved. Moving on to the issue of the state secrets and how whether or not Russia restricts immigration in the status quo. The negative team conceded my partner's argument that this is a state law that is for the national security of the Russian government, so this doesn't actually compute in today's debate round. And the fact is that the negative team is trying to make it sound like the waiver is just a technicality. No, the waiver is the requirement of Jackson Vanik. Russia's not just barely getting through. Russia has been getting through fully for 17 years, fully complying. It's time to get rid of it. Moving on to hypocrisy. They talked about how just because other countries are under it doesn't mean it's hypocrisy. However, they dropped 2 critical arguments. First, that we are hypocritic in the status quo. This alone means an affirmative ballot. This argument has flipped on the negative team and actually helps the affirmative team, that we are hypocritic in the status quo. Second, the real world scenario here. Congress isn't going to graduate every country at the same time. They've never done this ever. Russia is one country. We're doing it at one time. This also was conceded by the negative team. Finally, the issue of the World Trade Organization, the negative team accepted by failing to respond to the evidence that we only get the benefits. I repeat, we only get the benefits of Jackson Vanik if we do it unprompted by the WTO. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure speaking for you in today's debate.